But thank you all so much for joining us. International author Samantha Sotto Yambao will discuss her new fantasy novel, Water Moon, in this installment of Author Hour in Massachusetts. So, Samantha Sotto Yambao is a professional daydreamer, aspiring time traveler, and speculative fiction writer based in Manila, the Philippines. She is the author of Before Ever After, Love and Gravity, A Dream of Trees, and The Beginning of Always. And Water Moon is her fifth novel. So, Samantha, thanks so much for being with us today.
Hi, Robert. Thanks for having me. Thanks to everybody in the chat. I can't see you, but welcome, welcome.
Yeah, so Samantha, I finished your book this afternoon. What a masterpiece. And
Oh, thank
I
you so much.
understand this is breaking news. The book's less than 2 weeks old or thereabouts. It is a USA Today bestseller. It is a Sunday Times bestseller. It is an Amazon bestseller. It is a Barnes and Noble bestseller. So congratulations on the book's early success.
Thank you so much. It was quite a surprise,
Yeah.
considering it's my fifth book, but it's my fantasy debut, so it was quite a shock.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that. So I'm sure some folks on the call have read the book already, but for those that haven't, and for those who watch the recording, could you give us sort of a brief synopsis of the book's plot?
Okay, that's the dreaded question, I think, for all authors. Like when when you're asked, so what's the book about? So I'll try to do it justice and not be tempted to just read off the back of the book. Um, so basically, this is a story about Hannah, who inherits this magical pawn shop in Tokyo. And what makes this pawn shop so special is that instead of the usual, trinkets and jewelry and things like that that you take to pawn to the pawn shop, you trade regrets, you trade your choices. Um, and so this pawn shop sits at the border between two worlds, so our world and Hannah's magical world. On the day that Hannah inherits this pawn shop, she discovers that her father's missing. And the pawn shop is ransacked, and the most important item in the pawn shop has been stolen. And in comes in this physicist, Keishin, or K for short, and who helps her on this magical quest to find her father and this missing choice that has been pawned in the pawn shop. And I won't say anything more because I know I'm going to spoil it. So I'm just like, I'm going to shut up now.
No, that's fine. I know in previous interviews you said that you prefer the less the reader knows about the book, the better. It is just a magical book. And as several of the characters say, nothing is as it seems. So
Yes.
we'll tease you with that. So we'll get back to the book a bit, but I did want to talk about you and your writing process. And
Okay.
so you're a first time fantasy author. Your
Yes.
previous books are more set in magical realism.
Yes.
So I will say this book is certainly a fantasy first and foremost, but there is some speculative fiction in there, some adventure, some mystery, some romance, some magical realism. So there's a lot of different elements. Even if you're not a fantasy reader, I think you would still enjoy this book. There's just a lot of different things going on in it. But as a first-time fantasy writer, can you talk to us about your writing process? I'm specifically interested in world building. So
Okay.
how do you approach world building in your stories?
Okay. So since I'm not a fan, well, okay, I guess now I am a fantasy writer. But when I said about this, I didn't even know like the technical words for like fantasy. Like I didn't think of, I mean, I read fantasy, but as a reader, you don't go like, oh, world building and all these stuff. Like, how does the magic system work? And I was never that kind of like technical reader, like in terms of fantasy. I just enjoyed immersing myself in that world. So when I set about building the world of Watermoon, that's how I approached it. I really didn't think about it as like, oh, okay, I'm going to set up this magic system. I'm going to build this world. I really put on like the goggle, or I saw it through the lens of Keisha. I just like, I was in his shoes and Hannah was showing me around her world. And I was just basically taking notes. Does that make sense? So it was a lot of this book was written when I was like half asleep. So, thank you, menopause. Perimenopause, like you wake up so many times at night and you can't get back to sleep. And in those moments when you're like half asleep and half awake, you get all these strange ideas because you're like desperate to go to sleep, right? And you don't want to check your phone, so you're just staring up at the ceiling. And so a lot of the book was written that way. So I felt like almost like the next day I was just typing it out. You know what I mean? So it's like I it was when my inner editor was asleep that I allowed myself to imagine and be crazy. And it was such a freeing experience considering like my other books had a big historical component, which required a lot of research. And I really wanted to make things, as grounded in reality as possible so that the magical realism elements would be believable. Like my second book's about Isaac Newton. My first book was like a road trip through time, basically, from Herculaneum and to present day. So this was such a freeing experience. So I almost say like I half dreamed the book to life, if that doesn't make me sound like a crazy person.
So let me give you some real world objects or concepts, and you tell me what you did with these in your book. And
Oh,
we
okay,
won't
sure.
delve into spoilers. These will be
Yeah,
relatively
yeah,
minor
yeah.
things. But so in the world of Water Moon, what are seashells?
Oh, they tell jokes. So you pick it up and then they'll tell you a joke. Don't they
And
all? Don't Elsie?
is that how that works in the real world as well? Uh, how about the concepts of prayer? What's different about a
Okay.
prayer in the
Okay.
Water Moon universe?
Okay. So when you pray at your shrine, you have these little candles. And I imagine that the smoke of these candles would carry off your prayers, and the smoke or the prayers would eventually wind up in a temple made of wax. And in this temple, that's when you can hear all these prayers when you light these candles again. So you can hear all these little whispers of prayers. So I imagine, actually, that's a thought I've had it for a while, so I've always thought like, yeah, it's candles are so associated with prayer. And I thought, yeah, what if these candles are listening in our prayers and they just carry our prayers away?
Now, Samantha, many of the folks tuning in and who will watch the recording are from Massachusetts. We have a notoriously unreliable commuter rail and train system. But
Okay.
just how bad are the trains in
Oh,
Water Moon?
okay. You can wait a lifetime for your train. Like it may or may not come. Like you set up shop at the train station, you have your little vegetable garden, you have your little tents. Like you could be there your entire life. You could raise your family at the train station just waiting for your train to come. So if you ever complain about your train station and your train system in Massachusetts, yeah, no, doesn't compare.
And I could literally do 50 more. I'll just do a few more though. What about stars? What are stars like in your book?
Okay. So in the book, there's this entire village that's dedicated to painting the night sky. They paint them on kites. I mean, they paint your wishes on kites. So you send them over like your wish, and they interpret this in a kite. And every night they send these kites off into the sky, and those are your stars.
And then there are some special houses that are constructed a little oddly. You also have some birds made with this material. What material am I speaking of?
Paper, the origami. Yeah. So like in this world, you can fold time like you would fold paper. And so there's a museum of education where the exhibits are paper cranes that carry off like little bits of history and life lessons in the form of paper cranes.
There we go. Well, I'll end it there, but we could go on and
And now
on
I
and
sound
on.
like it's saying this out loud. I sound like a crazy person.
That's all right. But I love the world that you created. It was so fun. And some of those objects and their like second meanings or their new purposes were just so random and fun. It was great. I really
Dream
enjoyed
logic, dream logic.
yeah. So where did you draw inspiration for some
Okay.
of the magic in your book?
Okay. All right, that's a good question. Yeah, so well, the story itself came from a was the seed came from this trip I had to Tokyo. No, not Tokyo, sorry, Kyoto. And I was in the historical district, and there's this street called Ninenzaka Street. And along this street, it's like this cobbled road, and you have all these historical old houses. So it really feels like you're stepping back in time. And if you walk along that street, there are no signs on the houses because they really want you to feel like these are just the same old merchant houses or residential houses that they had. And so you really don't know what you're walking into. So you don't know if it's a little souvenir shop. You don't know if it's a ramen shop or anything like that. And I wandered into one of these houses, and it turned out to be a very modern coffee shop inside. And so I wanted to capture that sense of wonder and surprise. So I filed that away, and I said, okay, I want to write a story that features like, having this expectation, stepping through the door and then being totally surprised and transported into a different place. But I didn't know that was an idea, but I didn't know the story that would go along with that. And what happened was during the pandemic, like everybody else, I was stuck at home, and it was that time of the year where we usually visit Japan. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was like going stir crazy because in the Philippines, we had one of the world's longest lockdowns. We were on lockdown for 2 years. Like, we could not go out of the house. I like seriously. So I had my armchair vacation to Japan. And so I was thinking about Japan, and I was also thinking about Manila. And in Manila, pawn shops are basically all over the place. They're ubiquitous. And I figured this is such a lifeline for people, at this, during that time. And it just got me to think that, the items that the people bring to these pawn shop, they're not just simple objects. Every thing you bring into your life, every object you purchase, that's a choice you make, right? And that behind that choice is a lifetime of choices. And so that's where the idea of pawning choices came from, because you're not just pawning a watch or a television or your wedding ring. You're pawning everything, all the decisions that led you to that point. So that's where the whole idea for Water Moon started. Yeah. And the rest just popped into my head as I was like dreaming, I guess.
Yeah, and so how do you develop your characters? In this
Mm.
book, there's really two main characters, particularly though Hannah. Is there a little bit of you and Hannah? And how did you go about creating that character?
Okay, so I guess again, pandemic thoughts, because we were stripped of so many freedoms during that time. And I felt, I was thinking about, oh, what if this is forever? Like, what's a world without choice? What would that look like? So that's where the idea of Hannah came about, because I was feeling trapped in my own experience. But that's as far as our similarity goes. I really try to be as invisible as possible for my books. I think that's the author's job. Like you should be like this, the minute you show your hand, the minute you show yourself, I think that's a bit of a fail. So I try not, me as a person, I try not to be there. So I don't, really draw that much on my own experience to create the characters. But that's where Hannah's way of thinking came from. My own thoughts of being, trapped during the pandemic. And then Kay came about because I wanted, somebody to bounce it, because the title of the book is Water Moon, right? It's the reflection of the moon in the water. And it's like they're almost like they mirror each other in a way, they're like opposites. And so like they're the same but opposite. Does that make any sense at all? But so like I wanted a person who had a completely different perspective on things. So that when he went into Hannah's world, it was almost like he was taking the reader there. Like the reader could view the world through his eyes.
Yeah, understood. No, I love both characters. I thought they interacted with each other really well. So talking about plot now. Now, Samantha, are you a plotter or are you a pantser? Do
I'm
you
um I'm a plantser.
yes. That's the third
So
option. Yes. So tell us about that.
Yeah, because I want to enjoy the book in the same way readers do. So I don't want to have so much of it like all planned out because I want to be surprised as well. So I kind of have a general idea of where I want to take the story because of, like I need that assurance because I would die of anxiety if I didn't know how a book was going to end, right? But like in the middle, I want to be able to put the characters in a scene and just watch them interact and see what they would do with that scene, and so that it becomes very organic. And as I said, like I just take down notes, I let them do their thing and like, okay, hang on, let me get that bit and just type it out. So I feel like if I plotted out everything, in too much detail, I'd be bored because I know in advance what was going to happen. So I want them to do their own thing.
Were there any Japanese mythology or history or
Mm.
cultural references in your story?
Okay, so I'm not Japanese first and foremost, so I just want to, because I've seen some articles about me saying that this is a translated work, or, I've seen so many permutations of my name, Samantha Yamamoto, or Soto with a one T. It's like, I guess people try to fit it in their perspective, right? Like, oh, she kind of looks Japanese. So yeah, so sure. And because that genre is kind of big right now, like these cozy fantasy Japanese books.
But the book
Um,
is set in Tokyo, Japan. That's right.
yeah, yeah, it is, it is, it is. So understandable, completely understandable. I get it, I get it. So
Yeah, yeah.
like, I don't fault anyone. It's fine. Um, yeah, so what I was saying, so I really wanted to be respectful of the culture. So I did a lot of research. I mean, that's my background. My other books are set in other cultures as well. So I really was very mindful of that. I did there is the fox creature that they see in the desert. Again, no spoilers. That is based on a mythological creature in Japan, and also I incorporated some of their ideas about your life's purpose, the ikigai, and even how they mend broken pottery with the gold. So little touches like that, because of course I wanted it to be authentic. And my publisher also got a sensitivity reader to make sure that we were very respectful of the culture of Japan, because I'm not Japanese.
Yeah. I think one thing I appreciated about the book is there wasn't too much like overt violence. There was certainly
Mm,
a lot of like scary scenes. You had me scared
right.
as I don't like the baddies, but I thought that I appreciated that there was little violence, and then that there wasn't too much sex either. I mean, there was one scene I would say I'd call it PG-13 nowadays. So but I think if that's a concern of anyone watching, I think the violence and the sex were PG-13 rated. Let's say. Um,
I always write with knowing that my parents are going to read it, so, and my 96-year-old grandmother is going to read it. So I don't like write anything that would give me a difficult time, explaining things. Because like when my dad reads, he basically live texts me as he reads. So I don't want to have to explain anything, that would just make the conversation awkward. So everything is fade to black.
there
And
you
also my
go.
kids read it. So yeah, no.
Yeah, you're getting the best. You're getting the worst of both worlds. Your kids are reading it, and your parents and grandparents are reading it. So I
Right,
understand.
exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
so how about what are some of the challenges? And I know you're new to fantasy writing, but what are some of the challenges you found in writing fantasy? Are there any unique challenges that you faced with fantasy as opposed to magical realism?
Yeah, yes. Because I feel like in many ways you're challenged to make the nonsensical make sense. You know what I mean? Because I think it magical realism, because you're building it on a foundation of things that people understand. You're just sprinkling it in. It's easy to make that leap. But if you're setting it in a purely, fantastical world, it's a bit of a challenge, like for the reader, I guess, to like understand that world if you're not very careful about describing it or explaining how these things work. But at the same time, you want to keep that whimsical element and not explain away too many things, because that's the whole point of it. So I think The difficult part is striking that balance, maintaining the magic, maintaining the mystery and the fantasy, but at the same time, creating a world where the readers can say, oh yeah, I get it. I get it. I understand. I understand enough of this world that I can enjoy it and I can go along for the ride. You know what I mean? So I felt that it was something completely new for me this time around, because with my other books, I just figured out, like, of course they get it. They understand what the concept, let's say, of what an immortal man is. There've been so many stories about that, or of time travel. We get that, but to create a completely different world with a whole new set of rules, that was a bit of a challenge, but also fun. That was the most fun part about it too.
I finished the book this afternoon, Samantha, and I was like, "Where's the dragon?" Because I thought that every fantasy book nowadays has to have some sort of dragon in it. So,
Yeah.
good job, good job, doing your own thing there. Um,
Thank you.
yeah. So, what do you hope readers take away from this book? Are there any sort of messages? Is there any sort of deeper meaning to the book beyond what's written in the page?
I try to stay away from saying anything like that, because I really believe what I wrote in the book about, um, it's like books have value when they're read, not when they're written, right? So like people can read it in on many different levels. Like if you want to read it for fun, or if you just want, some escape, or if you want to look at the deeper reflections on choice and free will, of course you can do that as well. But I don't, like, when I wrote it, I didn't set out like with some manifesto. Like it's not a personal manifesto that I want people to, like, oh yeah, this is what it means. Like this is what free will or what choice or regret means. You know, it's up to them to take away whatever they want from it. So it's a different book for different readers.
So you sort of told us the origin story of this particular book, but you've written four, maybe five books before this one. Can you
Yes.
talk about your personal origin story and how
Oh,
how did you become a published author?
okay. Okay. That's gonna sound strange too. I my background is in marketing. So I was 10 years in the corporate world. I used to work for companies like Johnson and Johnson and Unilever. Um, so that was my life, like selling baby powder, things like that, making baby powder commercials. And then when I started a family, I felt like, okay, I was traveling a lot because I was handling the region. In our regions, I had 7 countries underneath me, and I was like constantly on a plane, like zooming around and living in a suitcase. And I felt like I couldn't raise my eldest at the time at the same time as being on a plane all the time. So I said, okay, I was gonna be a stay-at-home mom and, do the whole thing, like drive my son to school. But with Manila traffic, it was just so impractical to drive home again after bringing him to school. So I decided to park myself at the Starbucks that was across from his school and just waited out there. And I figured, so this is how long ago it was, right? So they were charging for Wi-Fi, and I was not about to pay that because I was already paying for their overpriced coffee. So like, I'm not paying for Wi-Fi. So what am I going to do while he's in school for half a day? So I decided to write a book. And this is just for my own, entertainment and to save money. And I really didn't know what I was doing. So I had just finished reading The Time Traveler's Wife, and I was so depressed about what happened to Henry. And I said, if I write a book, my main character is not going to die. And I go like, no, wait, my main character can't die. And so that's where the idea of this immortal man came about, who takes tourists in modern day times to a road trip across Europe, and at the same time, in disguise talks about his previous lives. So that became Before Ever After. And after the school year, I had this book that my husband had read, and he goes, "So now what are you going to do?" I'm like, "I don't know. I guess I'll write another book for next school year." And so I really didn't think about anything, but what happened was, like, I don't know if this was the universe, but we were at this mall and there was this um, discount bookstore, like secondhand books. And on this table, it was one of those is that the for dummies, the orange and the
Yeah,
white one? It was
yeah,
like the publishing for dummies,
yep.
and it was like 50 pesos, so that's like a dollar, like a buck. And I said, oh, okay. Maybe it's a sign. So I picked that up and I'm like, oh, okay, so you need a literary agent. And this is how it works. Like, okay, so how do you get a literary agent? And I just researched that, and I don't know, I just found one by some miracle. Like an agent read it. She's not my agent now. We worked together for 10 years. I shifted to another agent because my other agent wasn't really representing fantasy. She was um like she represents the author who writes Gone Girl. So like my claim to fame. So like yeah, like Watermoon is not within her, but we worked together for all those other books. So I love her deeply, and she really took a chance on me. She read the book overnight. Like the next day, she made me an offer, and that was that.
What a
So it's
wonderful
kind
story that is, Samantha. So you were looking to, kind of kill time while your son was in half day kindergarten or whatever,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so
yeah,
you decided to write a book, and you wrote the book, and then you found how to get published for dummies for $1,
yeah.
and the rest is history. And now you're a multi-time best-selling author. So how about
Yeah,
that?
kind of crazy. And my son, who was in preschool at that time, just graduated from college. So that's how long ago it was. So this is not like an overnight thing. And just in case people are wanting to know, this has been quite the journey.
That's great. So, do you have any advice to give to someone who is trying to, an aspiring writer who's trying to break into the fantasy genre?
I guess, I don't know. I mean, I feel like if I had known as much as I do now about writing in the publishing world, I would have been so paralyzed, about writing. So I feel like the less you know about the technical part of the world, I mean, of the business side, like I think it's better for you to just focus on what you're writing. That's it. Just be so hyper focused on that and just write the best book you can. Like think about publishing and all finding an agent and all of that stuff later on, because I feel that that's work for me. It's best to write with the only voice in your head should be your own. So shut everything else out, because I feel like sometimes people get ahead, and instead of writing the book they want to write, they start researching all the statistics involved in getting an agent, and all the statistics about getting published. And that's just so depressing. Like if I knew all of that now, or like before I wrote it, I would have been so scared. So like the less you know about that part, like I feel like if you write a good book, it'll sell itself. It'll find its home, it'll find its audience, whether traditionally published or independently published, because that's what I did do. Like I'm a hybrid author. It's like my first two books were with Penguin Random House, and then my other two books I self-published. So I feel like there's so many ways to get published now, and the last thing you want is a lot of voices in your head. So yeah, so the less you know, the better. I feel.
No, I understand what you're saying there. So, what are some of your favorite fantasy novels and fantasy authors? And are there any books that
Okay.
have had a major impact on you as a writer?
Okay. Well, I would say, like, if not for the time traveler's wife, right? If I didn't have the major book hangover from that book, I wouldn't I wouldn't be where I am today. And a book that stayed with me also is Flowers for Algernon. I mean, it was such a depressing book. I think I still have a book and a hangover after all these decades after reading that. But I do like books that linger, that even if it's like, not as happy as as you want it to be. I think those are the kinds of books that stay with you. Not to say that the books I've written are sad endings. But yeah, so those are the things that have I guess have stuck with me. And then growing up, I also read Anne Rice a lot. I really enjoyed Anne Rice. Some other authors I don't want to mention because they're kind of controversial, but right now. um, so yeah, but I did enjoy their books at that time. Yeah. Oh, well, another book that kind of set me on this course was The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Again, I feel like books find you at the right time because I was a corporate slave for a very long time. And I was debating whether to just go on this vacation. And again, I found this book. It was just like waiting there. It wasn't arranged on the shelf. Like no one put it back. And it was The Alchemist, right? And it talked about like finding your purpose and about the universe conspiring to help you achieve that purpose. And that kind of helped me decide to take this crazy road trip across Europe, which eventually became the seed for Before Ever After. So I feel like books have a way of just, showing up in your life and changing it if you let it.
That's well put. That's well put. So, folks, if you have any questions for Samantha, you can get them into the chat or into the Q&A. We'll transition to audience questions shortly. And then you sort of touched on this, but can you talk about why you transitioned from magical realism to fantasy?
Oh, okay.
And
Right.
is it possible that you might write in other genres?
Okay. So for the first question, I think it was because of the pandemic, really. I mean, I wanted to escape. So I didn't want to spend my time like in this world. So, I just wanted to get as far away as I could from my reality. And I guess that's why Water Moon was set in such a fantastical, setting. So that was the answer to that. As for other genres in the future, for sure, because I never imagined myself doing this anyway, like being a writer, you know what I mean? I feel like the detours you take in your life, those are the best kinds of journeys. So who knows what I then the next book that I'm writing now is a fantasy. It's in the same, vein as Water Moon, but like after that, who knows? Who knows?
Well,
Maybe a
that actually
self-help.
self-help. Well, that actually, I was going to ask you, can you disclose to the extent that whatever you can divulge, what are you working on currently? And,
Oh
what
my
is next
gosh.
for Samantha? So, if you've already
Yeah.
told us all you can tell us, that's fine. But that's exciting that you're working on another fantasy.
Yeah. So, well, it's also, I guess I can say that it's also a portal fantasy. That's it. That's about all I can say about that.
Hey, and any possibility that we might see Kai and Hannah in the future? Is this Water Moon? Is this Water Moon universe, complete? Is this finished and over with, or do you think you might ever go back and perhaps, whether it's a sequel or a spin-off or something in that universe? Had you closed that door completely?
No, I haven't closed that door. I think there's so many stories that I haven't told about that world and about the characters in it. Like I fell in love with each and every character in that book. I mean, specific to Hannah, and Kay, maybe not. Probably not. Maybe they can cameo or something, but probably not. But for the other characters, for sure. Like I do have a story in mind now for one of the characters that I've s- I there's a story brewing in there. So that might happen. That might happen.
I started writing down quotes as I was listening to your story, and then I just couldn't keep up with all the great quotes. But one of them that stood out to me: losing your way is oftentimes the only way to find something you did not know you were looking for. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
that was a good one. And I will say that your story, and granted, I just finished it less than like 6 hours ago, but it is something that the ending, the overall story and the ending is certainly lingering with me. And I suspect I'll
Oh,
be
thank
thinking
you.
about it for days and weeks to come for sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's the
And
highest compliment.
yes, don't just let you. I like your lesson of not killing off Henry. Yes, don't. Let's try not to kill off our main characters. I hear what you're saying there. So I think so. Now we'll go to audience questions. We don't have too many, although I did have some submitted in advance. But Larry asks, do you read much fantasy? And do you have any favorite like contemporary fantasy authors? You had talked about some authors maybe that you've read 10, 20 years ago, but anyone
Yeah,
you're currently reading?
right. Okay. So when I was younger, like college, I mean, like definitely like high fantasy. So I was like my husband and I are together because of our love for the Bulgarian. We just bond, we just totally bonded over that. Like we were just imagining how Bulgarians cooking when they would go off camping, like we just bonded over like the hard cheese that they were eating and the bacon that she was cooking and the bread and I just like that's exactly why we're married, you know? So that sort of stuff growing up, and as I said, Anne Rice and things like that. Um, oh gosh, I hope you don't hear that. That's my dog trying to get in the room.
That's okay.
Um, Okay, I try not to read when I'm writing, okay, because I have such a bad memory that I'm so afraid that I am going to like inadvertently, absorb some of these things that I'm writing and regurgitate it and, be accused of plagiarism or anything. And I've kind of been writing nonstop since the debut came out. So the last book I read is actually not fantasy. Um, it's one of the books of the authors my agent represents. It's by Claire Osonko, and it's called Midnights with You, and it's about the Filipino diaspora, and I really love that. So I have the last fantasy book. Gosh, sorry, I can't even remember. So I guess maybe that's why I wasn't on the dragon trend because I was just so out of that universe for a very long time, So yeah, I haven't read fantasy in a while.
Yeah, no, it's better if you just stay away from dragons. So there's enough dragons.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Okay. Okay.
5, 10 years ago it was vampires, werewolves, and mermaids, and now it's
All
dragons.
right, right,
Everything
right,
is
right.
cyclical. So, but
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
so your book you deals a lot with regrets, and so we had
Yes.
a reader submit a question in advance, wanted to know, do you have any writing regrets about your writing career? Do you have any caged
Mm.
birds that you're willing to share with us?
Well, I don't know if it's a regret, but I just wish that I could write faster, because I'm not getting any younger. I'm 52. I'm turning 52. I don't want to get ahead of myself. So I'm turning 52, and I feel like I still have so many stories to tell. So I wish I could, write faster. So I don't know if that's called a regret or anything. I don't regret like the books I've written. I'm proud of all the books I've written. I think each book I've written has allowed me to get to this point, like it's been a journey. So one book teaches me to write the next book and the next book and the next book. So that informs what I write next. Because I never really, I mean, I didn't take this up in college and things like that, right? So I'm just kind of self-taught. And so every book I write, I kind of figure out, okay, I could have done this better. I could have done this better. So next time I'm just going to write a better book. So that's what I try to strive for. So I don't want to have any regrets as far as what I put out there, and I don't have any regrets. So regardless of its commercial or not commercial success, I mean, it's been a journey. So like before ever after what had mild success, I would say. And then Love and Gravity was like in its first week sold 600 copies, So you have your ups, you have your downs, and the other two I self-published, and that was difficult. That was a learning experience as well. So, but I feel like if I didn't write those books and the book that doesn't exist anymore, that became an organ donor for all my other books, I wouldn't have been able to write Water Moon.
Well,
Does
Samantha, you're
that make sense?
certainly having an up right now. So I think every author has their ups and their downs, and you're currently writing an up for sure. Okay.
Thank you.
But to go back to your point about you wish that you could write faster, could you give us any idea in terms of how long it generally takes you to write a book? And can you walk us through like a day in the life? Like
Okay.
when you're writing a book, are you, when are you writing that book? How for how long? How does that whole writing process work for you?
I think I have most time now because we're empty nesters. Like my daughter's off to college. She's in the US. She's in LA, and then my son is in Australia. So he went to college there. So I have like finally I have a lot of time. I have four dogs, so I don't know about a lot of time, and one of them is a husky. So yeah. Um, but it's pretty much a full-time job. So like I like to keep office hours, so I have my breakfast and then I write for a whole stretch and then I have my lunch. So I'm really in a place of privilege right now to be able to have this huge chunks of time. But then again, I'm 52, so it wasn't always like that, right? Because
Samantha, by the
I,
way, you keep saying you're 52. 52 is young for a writer. You've got decades ahead of you, so don't worry about that.
okay, okay. It's just that I notice like I can't see anything, without my glasses. You just notice these little things, and okay, so basically it will take me like 6 months to a year to get the book written, right? Depending on how heavy the research is, right? So if it's a more historical thing, then that's going to be longer. But I always have to factor in that, like in the traditional publishing world, there's that whole chunk of 2 years, from the time the book is sold to the time it actually gets out into shelves, right? Just as I said, I wrote this during the pandemic and it's just now coming out. So I feel like unless I have a pipeline of books, like after Watermoon, I'm just not going to be around for a while, so like people would have to wait. Like I have finished the next book, thank God. I have finished it and we're editing it now and it's due to my editor in like 2 weeks time. So that will come out, but from the time I submit it to my editor, that's probably going to be 2 years away, right? And yeah, and I just feel like I want to be able to have enough energy to keep up with my imagination, I guess is what I'm saying. Imagination and energy have to match. So, and eyesight too, eyesight.
So maybe I'm naive, but you're probably finishing up promoting this new book. It's been out for a couple weeks now. Maybe you have a couple more weeks or a month to go in promotion. It sounds like you're finishing editing your second book, your next
Right.
book, in the next 2 weeks. Does that mean that you're going to have a little bit of a respite, a little bit of a break coming up? Can you relax a little bit, Samantha, or are we moving on to our
Oh
next
gosh.
project immediately?
Yeah, no, I'm moving on to the next project because yeah, as I said, I'm not getting any younger and I just want to be able to keep the ball rolling. I mean, I think that's what I learned from my past experience. There were huge gaps between my books before. So, like for example, any momentum that I had with Before Ever After kind of died off before Love and Gravity came out. And I don't want a repeat of that, especially at this age. I'm sorry, I keep on bringing up age, but I guess that's something on my mind, so I I'm just being truthful, I'm just being honest, that is a concern for me. I do want to be able to tell all the stories I want to tell, so we'll be preparing the pitch for my option this year. So that means a few chapters and the synopsis. So that's what I'll be diving into as soon as I submit this second book in my contract. So busy,
And
busy.
Water Moon is very much about time. So it doesn't surprise me that you have a lot to say about time and age. So don't worry about that. So a couple more questions, then we might wrap up a little early. Larry wants to know, is English your second language? And if so, does that create any sort of special challenges for you as a writer?
No, English is my first language. Um, so my dad's first language is Spanish, and my mom, well, she's like part Chinese. Actually, my dad's part Chinese too, but he was raised speaking Spanish. And so they decided that our common language should be English. And I think that's pretty common here in the Philippines. Like a lot of people speak English as the first language. That's the medium of instruction at schools. Um, yeah, so English is my first language and Filipino is my second language. And I feel like I feel so grateful that I feel that it makes it a lot easier, I guess, to break into an international market if you're comfortable with the English language.
So, assuming it doesn't become sort of an anime or an animated film, if Water Moon were to become a live action film, who
Oh,
do you
wow.
want? Who do you want to have play Hannah? Who do you want to have play Kai?
Okay. Oh my God, that's such a fun question. I haven't actually thought about that. Um,
We're getting
no,
way ahead of ourselves, Samantha. But
yeah, I have no idea. Like maybe like for Kay, the guy in One Piece, the one
yeah,
I don't forget his name, but yeah, that guy. And maybe Hannah, the girl from Shogun.
there you
Oh,
go.
Anna Sawai. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Who I think just won a
Speak it
Golden
into
Globe.
the universe.
There you go. We'll put it out there. So, Samantha, where can folks learn more about you and your future works? Do you have
Okay,
a
yeah, I have a
website? Are
web.
you on your
Yeah, yeah,
social
yeah.
media? Yeah.
Sure. SamanthaSotto.com. That's my website. And I'm on Instagram, Samantha Sotto Yambao. Not on anything else. Oh, well, I'm on Facebook, yeah, but mostly on Instagram, that's where I am at.
Yeah, that's where authors are at, Instagram and for some TikTok, but mostly Instagram. So Samantha, was there any, and usually I'm the behind the scenes tech guy, so hopefully I did okay. Were there any
Oh,
questions you
great.
wished I asked you that I didn't, or is there anything else you'd like to say to the audience before we wrap things up?
No, I think you did a great job. It's like, this is what you do. This is your calling. Yeah, no, I can't think of any other questions. I think we've covered pretty much, yeah, everything. I just want to say like thank you to everybody who attended, and I hope you enjoy the book.
Yes, they will. I did, and they will too. So, folks, for those watching live, well, first of all, let's give Samantha a big virtual round of applause for a great conversation. For those watching live, look for an email from me in about a half an hour with a link to this recording and information about some other upcoming virtual author visits. Also, a link to Wellesley Books to purchase a copy of Watermoon. And when you exit the Zoom, please take 60 seconds and fill out the feedback survey that should pop up. All right. With that said, thank you so much, Samantha. Wonderful job, and best of luck in the future. And good things are in your future. I can just feel it.
Thank you so much, Robert.
You're
Thanks for having
welcome.
me.
Have a
All
great night,
right.
and in your case, have a good morning and have a great rest of your day.
All right. You too.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.